Now, this is quite a discovery. Fragments of a biblical scroll.
Turkish authorities have confirmed that an ancient Bible thought to be 1,500 years old.
The discovery of Bible written 1,500 years ago has revealed many secrets to the public. The Gospel of Barnabas found in Turkey during the anti-smuggling operation. Many of its teachings are matches with those in the Quran and oppose the Bible, especially the New Testament. This Bible recognized Jesus not as God or Son of God, but merely as a prophet who delivered God's words. The Gospel of Barnabas claims that instead of Jesus, Judas was crucified and Jesus was ascended to heaven while he was still alive. Chapter 39 of this Bible predict the upcoming prophet and mentions his name as Muhammad, who will come after him with new teachings. The Catholic churches tried to hide this Bible from the public.
Now, this is
Hang in there, Squidward. It's all part of the job.
That's me right now after seeing that previous first clip that you saw in this video. Wow. That is the dumbest thing that I have ever heard. So, the Gospel of Barnabas is a alleged gospel that lines up more with the Islamic view of Jesus, or who Muslims call Isa. And it talks about Jesus being a prophet, Jesus not being crucified, not rising from the dead, and a certain sect of Muslims believe this to be one of the lost gospels that they claim Jesus was given. And let's be entirely real here. Anyone with a thinking brain knows that the Gospel of Barnabas is not a reliable historical document. Why? Well, number one, the clearest piece of evidence, the four Gospels that we have today are based off of Greek manuscript, the universal language in the first century. And guess what? The Gospels, when you look at the original Greek manuscript, they're dated back to the late first century, meaning there are hundreds of thousands of people that can verify if the four Gospels are accurate. Plus, you have Paul's letters to judge the Gospels by that were written before the Gospels were written. Plus, you have historical records of people worshiping Jesus as God before any of the New Testament was put from pen to paper. So, clearly, the historical evidence is in the favor of the four Gospels, as the earliest manuscript evidence we have is from either late first century or early second century, when there are still a plethora of people around that could verify the reliability of the Gospels. And we have also been able to successfully verify that it is Matthew that's the author of Matthew, it is Mark the author of Mark, it is Luke the author of Luke, and it is John the author of John. So all of the historical evidence is in favor of the four Gospels that we have of the New Testament today, because they are dated back to the accurate point in history, the first century, when all these events happened. You have evidence before the Gospels were even written of people believing in the stories told about Jesus in the Gospels, and you have a plethora of archaeological evidence pointing towards these events happening as well, including the empty tomb that Jesus was placed in after his crucifixion. So all the evidence, even without the gospel, is in favor of the New Testament being a historically reliable document. So when you then look at the Gospel of Barnabas, you must give it a history test, and it fails the history test big time. The Gospel of Barnabas is dated back to the 13th century. It's believed to have been written either in the 13th century, 15th, or 16th century. That's where the manuscript evidence of the Gospel of Barnabas comes from. It is not from the 1st or even 2nd or 3rd century. Therefore, clearly, Barnabas himself could never have written this gospel because he had been long dead by the 1300s. And on top of that, there is no mention of the Gospel of Barnabas, or Barnabas even writing a gospel about Jesus from the early councils held by the church fathers, or by any historical reliable texts that were written in the 1st century. All of the apostles that died for their faith in Christ, all of the early Christians verify that Jesus claimed to be God and that Jesus proved his divinity through his works, death, and resurrection, whereas this alleged Gospel of Barnabas discredits all the things that Jesus did, and there's no one there to verify and discredit the Gospel of Barnabas because everyone was already dead. So, the Gospel of Barnabas fails the historical test. It is not from the accurate point in history. It's from centuries after the fact. And then when you read the Gospel of Barnabas, it's talking about medieval phrases, medieval ideologies. So clearly, the Gospel of Barnabas, with it being written in a medieval style language structure, clearly it could not be from the 1st century. So it can't be a case of, well, maybe we haven't discovered the manuscript evidence from earlier centuries for the Gospel of Barnabas. That would be literally impossible to do because medieval literary style did not exist in the 1st or 2nd century. So that discredits the Gospel of Barnabas. And another point I want to bring up, the Gospel of Barnabas consistently critiques and goes after Paul and calls Paul a deceiver, yet anyone who knows the historical Barnabas knows that he was a close friend of Paul. And he went with Paul on many missions, as seen in the book of Acts. So, clearly, this alleged Barnabas is not the historical Barnabas that knew Jesus, that knew Paul, that knew the apostles. So, clearly, this Barnabas that's being talked about here is not, we don't even know if it's even a real person. And another point that I want to make, scholars have been looking into this, and they found that the original language that this alleged gospel was written in was Italian. It was written in Italian. And this circles back to the Greek manuscripts, the universal language of the first century. The universal language of the first century was Greek. You had to know Greek. And with the universal language being Greek, it's obvious that for the four Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John to be reliable, they'd have to be written in Greek. And guess what? They are. Your original New Testament manuscripts, whether it be the four Gospels, whether it be Paul's letters, they're all written in Greek, the universal language of that time. Whereas the Gospel of Barnabas is written in a language that didn't even exist yet in the first century, Italian. Therefore, clearly showcasing that this gospel was written thousands of years after the fact, therefore leading scholars to ultimately conclude that this gospel was written either A, by a former Catholic convert to Islam, trying to convert other Catholics to Islam by creating this false gospel and passing it off as if Barnabas, the historical Barnabas, wrote it, and or it is Christians or Catholics that were sympathizers with Islam and with the Quran, and they tried to get Islam to enter into Europe for whatever reason. If you ask me, I believe the first reason to be more likely. So ultimately, even Muslim scholars reject the Gospel of Barnabas, even though it does tend to agree with more of what they believe about Jesus, but even your mainstream Muslim scholars can't overlook the clear issues with the Gospel of Barnabas, that this gospel was not written by the historical Barnabas, and it came thousands of years after both Jesus and Muhammad lived. So clearly, no matter what viewpoint you are, whether you're Christian or Muslim, the Gospel of Barnabas is not a historically reliable text. So, the Gospel of Barnabas is not reliable. It can be thrown into the same fiery pit as the other agnostic Gospels like Peter and Thomas, that were not written by those actual people. Rather, it was people that just took those names and tried to twist the narrative of the actual Gospels that we know are reliable because of manuscript evidence, archaeological evidence, and historical records outside of the New Testament as well that showcase the reliability of the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Whereas all the evidence for the Gospel of Barnabas, all the evidence for the Gospel of Thomas and Peter, all the evidence of that is that they're unreliable because they come hundreds and thousands of years after the fact, when there is no one left alive to verify the authenticity of the teachings within it. So therefore, the Gospel of Barnabas is false, and this is another major error in Islamic theology. Again, not all Muslims, most mainstream Muslims tend to reject the Gospel of Barnabas, but some that at least attempt to be historically honest in their minds try and use the Gospel of Barnabas as a basis to show that their view of Jesus is accurate. But when you do a basic Google search on the Gospel of Barnabas, you will clearly see that the Gospel of Barnabas was written thousands of years after the fact. It's not even in the right language, and it is in clear contradiction to the Greek manuscripts of the four Gospels that we have today. Therefore, the four Gospels we have today, being dated back to the appropriate time period in the appropriate language, and evidence both from before and after the Gospels were written, backing up the authenticity of the four Gospels, show that they are historically reliable texts about Jesus, whereas the Gospel of Barnabas is entirely made up. It's entirely fiction, and it's something that was likely made by either Islamic sympathizers or a Catholic convert to Islam that took place during medieval times when you read the literary style. So therefore, my message to anyone that believes that the Gospel of Barnabas is reliable: wake up, wake up, wake up, and put your faith in Jesus. God bless you all. Thank you for watching.